March 23, 2025, Sunday, first chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Before taking up the actual text, I would like to repeat something which I have said earlier also because it is relevant, and that is I will mention Shri Aurobindo's relationship with the Bhagavad Gita. Many people have written commentaries on the Bhagavad Gita. All the great Acharyas, Shankaracharya, Ramanuja, and so many others. And Shri Aurobindo also has written that essays on the Gita from which these notes are taken. But there is a difference. Shri Aurobindo's relationship with the Gita is more intrinsic in the sense that all the other acharyas they explained the Gita. They read other scriptures, could be the Upanishads, the Brahma Sutras, Puranas, whatever, Brahmanas, or some other guru. They did yoga sadhana under them, and whatever realization they got, then they started interpreting the ancient scriptures, and in that process, they also interpreted the Gita. So, if we have to take an example, the example is you climb to the terrace of a building from some ladder outside the building, and the other is you climb to the terrace from a staircase inside the building. This is a big difference. In other words, I have mentioned earlier also that Shri Aurobindo, after he came out from prison, he delivered a speech which is well known amongst his followers. It is called the Uttarpada speech. In that speech, there is that crucial sentence. He says that God wanted me to do yoga. God wanted me to do yoga, therefore he sent me to prison and broke the ties that I would not be able to break myself and gave a copy of the Bhagavad Gita in my hands. See, Shri Aurobindo was given solitary confinement. After capital punishment, it is the severest punishment. You are cut off from the whole world. You are not allowed to meet anybody. Solitary confinement. For others, it is a curse, but for him it became a blessing because he could, in that solitude, practice the yoga of the Gita without any distraction, without any disturbance. That is what he said. God, he wanted, and therefore he sent me to prison and and broke the ties that I would not be able to break, and gave a copy of the Gita in my hands. So please remember this thing, and you will see it when we read the footnotes. There will be certain passages where it will become obvious that only a person who has used the Gita as a means, the word in Sanskrit is sofan. So please bear this in mind. He is not a mere commentator, or in more sophisticated language, you have the word exegete. An exegete is a person who takes it upon himself to interpret the scriptures. The scriptures का क्या मतलब है? That activity is called exegesis, and someone who practices it is called an exegete. So Shri Aurobindo is not merely an exegete of the Gita. So Whatever he has written by way of explanation, you can say is almost autobiographical. This is the big difference. He has used the Gita to achieve realization. He has not achieved realization by some other means. So we'll take up the text. I I forgot. I mean, you can do a Google search. The total number of shlokas in the Gita is 700. And then they also give you the breakup. How many shlokas are uttered by Sanjay, by Dhritarashtra, by Arjuna and by Lord Krishna? वो ब्रेकअप है, वो मिल जाता है गूगल सर्च में. Obviously, Lord Krishna's is the maximum, then Arjuna, then Sanjay, and then Dhrit. This is the only verse that Dhritarashtra speaks. In the whole of the Gita, the first verse is spoken by Dhritarashtra. He does, after that, he only listens. Dharma kshetre kurukshetre samaveta yuyutsava mamaka pandavaschaiva kimakuruvata Sanjaya. Dhritarashtra said, on the field of Kurukshetra, the field of the working out of the dharma, gathered together, eager for battle, what did they, O Sanjaya, my people and the Pandavas? In other words, here itself a hint is given that the teaching of the Gita became necessary because on the battlefield of Kurukshetra, because it was not an ordinary battle. It was not a battle being fought for regaining lost kingdom. The Kauravas had grabbed the kingdom of the Pandavas, so they were not fighting to get back their share of the kingdom. It was fought for the defense of the law of righteousness. That is what is, and that is what Lord Krishna also says. जब भी धर्म का बिल्कुल नाश होने लगता है तब मैं पैदा. So Arjuna, he will use the word protagonist. A protagonist is someone who is entrusted with a mission. So Arjuna is the protagonist of the divine will. He is being enjoined to protect the law, the reign of righteousness. If the Kauravas would win, it would mean the law of unrighteousness prevails. And in fact, somebody pointed out, a great writer pointed out, that ultimately, if you refer to the Mahabharata, what happens there? They fought and fought and fought, but the outcome was inconclusive. Then what did they decide? They will engage in individual combat. Bhim and Duryodhan will fight, and whoever will win, that side will be declared the winner. And there again the same thing happened. They fought and fought and fought. वो पेड़ उखाड़ के एक दूसरे पे फेंके, सब कुछ हुआ, but the outcome remained inconclusive. Then what happened? Then Lord Krishna hinted to Bhim to hit below the belt, hit him on the thigh. Now, as per the laws of rules of Gada Yudh, that was illegal. But when Lord Krishna took a small branch and broke it on his thigh. So Bhim interpreted it to mean that he is telling him to hit below the belt, which was unfair. So that intellectual person, he pointed out that where was the need to go out of the way to make Bhim commit an illegal action. The author of the Mahabharata could have just said that both were very strong, they fought and fought and fought, but ultimately Bhim prevailed. That would have also served the purpose. Where was the need to introduce this new complication of making Bhim win by illegal means? वैसे ही जिता देते, तो उसका वो जवाब यही है. दिस इज द टीचिंग ऑफ द गीता, दैट audit that the ethical laws are of two kinds. One is the ordinary dharma, which keeps society together, but the other is the law of the spirit, which transcends the ordinary dharma. In other words, rules of ethical conduct are not absolute. This is the point. In certain contexts, they have to be transcended. They have to be brushed aside. The same thing happens in the Ramayana. How is Bali killed? But Lord Ram hides behind a tree and kills him. And later on, his wife, she बहुत धुतकारती है लॉर्ड राम कि तुमने ये इलीगल काम किया. But then you have to wait. Supposing Lord Ram would have followed the laws of battle and not done that, and Bali would not have been killed, then what would happen? The consequences would have been disastrous. This is the point. Same thing if supposing Bhim were vanquished, then the Kauravas would have won. क्योंकि वो दुर्योधन भी बड़ा शक्तिशाली था, ऐसा नहीं था कि वो कमजोर सा था. तो then what would have happened? It would almost change the course of history, at least in the subcontinent, in the continent of India. So this is so. In other words, this he will use the term Kurukshetra is a field of the evolving dharma. In other words, dharma is not fixed and laid down once and for all in the Manu Smriti, but it can change with time. Eager, what did they say, O Sanjaya? And even in the translation of the first sloka, it is given on the field of Kurukshetra, the field of the working out of the dharma. So the dharma is not something static, it is working out. Among the great religious books of the world is that it does not stand apart as a work by itself. I had mentioned this thing in the beginning itself in the first introductory talk, that we can look at the Gita from four different perspectives. The first perspective is that it is an episode in a epic. An epic is like the Mahabharata, उसमें कई side कहानियाँ भी, like Nal, Damayanti, others also. Gita is also one of them. That is one attitude. So here Sri Aurobindo says that unlike the Bible, the teaching of the Bible, how did Christ receive that knowledge? He went to a cave and he used to meditate there, and there he received the knowledge of the Bible. He spent the time in prayer and meditation. So that is, in India we would say he got realization in that meditation in that. The same thing happens in Quran. Muhammad Sahib is not the author of the Quran. Muhammad Sahib, वो जो sacred month of Ramzan, उसमें यही तो है कि early in the morning he would take a light some nashta or breakfast and then go to that cave, and there he would spend the whole day in silence and prayer, and Gabriel, the closest angel of God, would come and recite the Quran to him as if God is speaking directly. And then he would come back in the evening and then dictate what he had heard. So Muslims, they give this argument to prove that the Quran is the revealed word of God. Because Muhammad Saab was an illiterate कैमल ड्राइवर, वो तो गौए जैसे पालने के लिए किसी को रख लेते हैं, भेड़ भेड़ बकरियों को ऐसे ही उनको रखा था। वो एक अमीर औरत थी, उन्होंने उनको रखा वो ऊंटों को चराने के लिए। Later on, I mean, things happened. She eventually married him, but he was totally illiterate. So the argument that they give is, how can an illiterate person write the Quran? It proves that it is the revealed word, and Muhammad Sahib was only the channel, the instrument through whom it flowed. Just as a stenographer is not the author of the book, similarly, Muhammad Sahib is not the author of the Quran. In Urdu, about the Quran, they say, वो मोहम्मद साहब को नाजल means what? Normal cold is nazla. Nazla is जो which drips down. So when they say Quran nazal हुआ means वो ऊपर से उनको उतरा. Like cold drips down from above. That is why they say Muhammad साहब को Quran nazal. Anyway, so what Shri Aurobindo points out is that these sacred texts they are not part of any narrative. They are it becomes clear. The peculiarity of the Gita among the great religious books of the world is that it does not stand apart as a work by itself, the fruit of the spiritual life of a creative personality like Christ, Muhammad, or Buddha. The Dhammapada is the utterances of Lord Buddha, or of an epoch. Epoch is age, yuga, of pure spiritual searching like the Veda and Upanishad. You have the Vedic age and then you have the Upanishadic age. But the notable feature about these ages is that a whole community who were members of a society were dedicated to spiritual pursuits, not just random and stray individuals. But is given, see there you are. The Gita is given as an episode in an epic history of nations and their wars and men and their deeds. So, in other words, he is explaining what is an epic. An epic is a narrative which has a very vast canvas. It deals with the history of nations, of wars, of battles, जिसका outcome will have effect for generations to come. The epic is not a narrative of some सास बहू का झगड़ा या ननद भाभी का नहीं बनती और it is not petty domestic issues. It is a very vast issue which does not deal with these small things. That is an epic. It is different from an ordinary novel. In epic history of nations and their wars and men and their deeds and arises out of a critical moment in the soul of one of its leading personages. So the Gita is the crisis that arises in a mighty hero at the critical moment. Why critical? Because Arjuna was already a very recognized warrior. शूरवीर था, ये पहले ही बात सबको पता थी. But this is the final test. If he distinguishes himself here, this will be it will be the crowning glory of his career as a successful warrior. That is why their deeds and are at a critical moment. In other words, he will be put to the ultimate test in the soul of one of its leading personages, face to face with the crowning action of his life, a work terrible, violent, and sanguinary. Sanguinary, you understand? Huh? Bloody, yes. It is from the French word sang, S-A-N-G, which means blood. तो उसका adjective is sanguinary. At the point when he must either recoil from it altogether. So Arjuna is standing at the crossroad. Either he goes ahead and fights or he steps back or carry it through to its inexorable completion. Inexorable, you understand? Which cannot be avoided. Which cannot be avoided. Inexorable completion. वो कई बार एक ऐसी सिचुएशन होती है कि एक बार तुम उसमें पड़ जाओ तो फिर एंड तक ही जाना पड़ेगा. यू कैनॉट, जैसे ऑपरेशन, एक बार ऑपरेशन शुरू हो जाए फिर नहीं तुम कह सकते नहीं मैंने नहीं कराना, बंद कर. दैट यू कैन, देन इट इज गो थ्रू. सो दैट इज, so the Gita is like that. Violent, the teaching of the Gita must therefore be regarded not merely in the light of a general spiritual philosophy or ethical doctrine, but as bearing upon a practical crisis in the application of ethics and spirituality to human life. In other words, when we every day in life we we meet we encounter situations where our ethical norms start becoming shaky. Pardon? Wobbly. Simple example. I have mentioned it earlier. A diplomat, ambassador, अपनी लाइफ में वो झूठ नहीं बोलता पर नेशन के लिए इफ ही सेज मैं झूठ नहीं बोलूंगा एंड ही टेल द ट्रूथ, सब चौपट कर दें. Similarly, there is that famous example that a Mahatma Sadhu Baba was sitting in the forest and meditating. Suddenly, there was a lot of commotion around him, and he opened his eyes and he saw a man with wounds and blood oozing running towards him. And that man said that I am being chased by a murderer and I am going this way. But if that murderer asks you where he has gone, you say this way. Then I will be saved, otherwise he will catch me and kill me. Now what should the Mahatma do? Yeah. But if you believe that telling a lie is telling the truth is an absolute law, then what should you do? But then he will be murdered. वो फिर उसे ही मार देगा क्या मतलब तू भी मिला हुआ इसीलिए जवाब नहीं दे. So these are those critical moments that come in our lives in the application of ethics. It's not easy to apply them. Ethical? Yes, of course. You take, for example, these ethical dilemmas arise. Take the case of Mother Teresa. She was against birth control. And she used to say if ever someone has a child which he does not want, give it to me. But don't use contraception. That was an act because it is against the Catholic faith. But is it practical? But that is the point of the Bhagavad Gita. The Bhagavad Gita will replace all these laws which change with time with another law which is absolute. That is what the Gita is about. कि वो फिर एक new which will have these laws which have to change with time have for their foundation ethics, ethical laws. The Gita will substitute these ethical laws by a spiritual law, which is that is why it is called the Sanatan Dharma, which is applicable for all time. What that law is, that is what 18 chapters are all about. What is that new basis for action when the ethical law is outgrown or becomes irrelevant? And this is what I said in my introductory talks also, that the occasion for the teaching of the Gita is the insufficiency of the moral law. When pressed to the extreme, the moral law becomes insufficient. There is a humorous incident also, that in a class, the lesson that was being taught for that day ended 5 minutes early. So now the question before the teacher is, he couldn't let the children go because they'll make noise and the other classes will be disturbed. So to keep them engaged, he said, I'll ask you a riddle, and if you can solve it, मैं 5 या 10 रुपए का इनाम भी दूं. So they all became quiet and attentive. So he said, which came first, the hen or the egg? पहले कौन आया, अंडा के मुर्गी? So all were quiet, because obviously if you say hen, then from where did it come? Egg, from where did it come? Anyway, one boy raised his hand. So the teacher was surprised and he asked, Bolo? He said the hen came first. He said, how? He said, sir, that is the second question. I have answered one question, so first give me my 10 rupees. You said whoever will answer the first question, he'll be rewarded. This is the second question. So let's see what the Gita says to us. So we are only preparing the ground for the teaching, for receiving the knowledge of the bearing upon. Now the second footnote. It is on that phrase working out of the dharma. We might symbolically translate in other words, in the main book, Essays on the Gita, he discusses what is Kurukshetra. Kurukshetra is not only that battlefield in Haryana where the battle took place, but it is symbolic of life in general, which is a place of constant struggle. Even if there is no violence, but the fact is, the Kurukshetra stands for this world where there is constant struggle and even a little progress is achieved in the face of great opposition, even a minor victory. We might symbolically translate the phrase as the field of human action, which is the field of the evolving dharma. The Gita takes for its frame such a period of transition and crisis as humanity periodically experiences in its history, in which great forces clash together for a huge destruction and reconstruction, intellectual, social, moral, religious, political, and these in the actual psychological and social stage of human evolution culminate means end, culminate usually through a violent physical convulsion. Convulsion is upheaval, uthal puthal, what they call. Right? Not only the struggle between righteousness, physical convulsion of strife, war, or revolution. The Gita proceeds from the acceptance of the necessity in nature for such vehement crisis, and it accepts Not only the moral aspect, the struggle between righteousness and unrighteousness, between the self-affirming law of good and the forces that oppose its progression, but also the physical aspect, the actual armed war or other vehement is insistent, physical strife between the human beings who represent the antagonistic powers. Antagonistic is opposite. It's a long sentence, something very dear to Shri Aurobindo. I mean, he can't resist the temptation of going on and on with rolling sentences. But in brief, what he is saying is, and I'll tell you the background probably why he says it. What he is saying is that whatever ideal you may preach, non-violence, in Jainism they preach non-violence as the paramo dharma and all. The fact is that violence is a fact of life. You cannot wish it away. You cannot just argue it away. It is a fact of life and it has a rightful place in the universal scheme of things. Violence has a place, and that place has been assigned by the Supreme Creator. In other words, unfortunately, he will say here a day will come when there will be no need for, but that is utopia, that is Ram Rajya, golden millennium. But facing the reality of the world as it is and not as it will be in some distant future, violence is a necessity, is a fact of life. And all often great construction takes place only on the base foundation of a great destruction. This unpleasant truth we have to push it down our gullets. We have to accept it. The other background in it is, you see, I don't know exactly whether there is a chronological link. Gandhiji also was a great admirer of the Gita and he wrote a small commentary on the Gita. Now, in that commentary, Gandhiji faced this dilemma that the Gita sanctions violence. He clearly tells Arjuna, fight, kill them, and enjoy the world. He said, Tasmat Tvamuttishta yash bhuntva rajyam shatruo ko maro. Now, Gandhiji was a great champion of non-violence. So, how to reconcile these two positions? So, in his interpretation of the Gita, he twisted the thing. He said that this battle of Kurukshetra is only allegorical. An allegory is a story which conveys a moral message, plus all the figures in that allegory stand for abstract virtue. For instance, if supposing Bhim or Arjuna stands for truth, then they will say in an allegory, then virtue lifted up the shield of truth and protected itself, something like that. That is allegory. So Gandhiji said that it is an allegory and that actually no physical battle was fought. It is only a description. The battle of Kurukshetra is only a description of the inner battles that rage inside us, where our asuric and daivic tendencies battle with each other for gaining supremacy. So this is the term that he gave. Okay, actual, because if he accepted the fact that Gita sanctions violence, then it's a problem for him because he was a great champion of non-violence. So this is of ahimsa. So probably Shri Aurobindo, see what he is saying here. The Gita proceeds from the acceptance of the necessity in nature for such way, and it accepts not only is there a moral aspect, the struggle between righteousness and unrighteousness, between the self-affirming law of good. Ultimately, see what is the meaning of self-affirming law. In other words, there are certain ethical norms which are self-evident. For instance, I have only given example exceptions, but naturally, spontaneously, nobody believes that telling lies is good. Nobody will say that telling lies is something very good. There's no harm. ठीक है, there may be exceptions and all, but fundamentally, truth telling, adhering to the truth is virtuous. Someone said adhering to virtue may often result in loss of teeth. They get knocked out. So, well, whether easier or not, but similarly, spontaneously we believe theft is bad. We can always find some exceptional reasons कि अगर कोई अमीर डिसऑनेस्ट है उसका पैसे लेके गरीबों को बांट दो, that but these are exceptions. Spontaneously we believe theft is bad, telling lies is bad. So generally tell, good is something self-evident. It is self-affirming, it doesn't need proof. That is the point. The Gita from the acceptance of the person, and it accepts not only the struggle between between the self-affirming law of good and the forces that oppose its progression, but also the physical aspect, violence. With so many ladies here, you all know कि कभी कभी वो बच्चा ऐसी जिद पकड़ लेता है कि उसको थप्पड़ मारना ही पड़ता है। लाख तुम चाहो कि ना मारना पड़े, but sometimes you are driven to it. I mean, no mother is happy to beat her child, but it is you can't avoid it because children are children. So the self and the forces that, but also the physical aspect, the actual armed war or other vehement. Take Duryodhan's case. He said, "I will not part with even land, even to the equal to the tip of a needle." तो इस सिचुएशन में क्या करो? You have to fight. सब समझा लिया, बुझा लिया, सब कुछ कर लिया, पर वो अड़ा रहा. The actual armed war or other vehement physical between the human beings who represent the antagonistic power. And then he says, it is true, a day may come when we will be able to live happily without violence. But till then, what? That is, a day may come, must surely come, we will say, when humanity will be ready spiritually, morally, socially for the reign of universal peace, Ram Rajya. Meanwhile, the aspect of battle and the nature and function of man as a fighter have to be accepted and accounted for by any practical philosophy and religion. The Gita, see, the Gita taking life as it is and not only as it may be in some distant future, puts the question how this aspect, that is, this dimension of using physical violence even and function of life, which is really an aspect and function of human activity in general, can be harmonized with the spiritual existence. So this is the scope and ambit of this whole spiritual book, how to harmonize practical life with a spiritual foundation, how to live your day-to-day life in which all these things are necessary, like violence and all, and yet live it from a spiritual, from a consciousness founded on a spiritual foundation. Clear? It is a literary device. It is a literary device. Sri Aurobindo's most important book is what? Life Divine. He doesn't say divine life. The life divine. Normally, we would have said divine life. वो है भी एक डिवाइन लाइफ मिशन वो शिवानंद या किसी की, but he has inverted it. The life divine, it catches your attention. By inverting the phrase, it grips your attention. That would be very prosaic. That would be normal prose. And socially for the reign of you. Meanwhile, वो एक श्री अरविंद की एक और किताब है द आवर ऑफ गॉड, वो है छोटी सी, उसका जो फर्स्ट फर्स्ट या सेकंड आर्टिकल का जो लास्ट सेंटेंस है वो भी यही है. Meanwhile the dread law is there and none can abrogate it. The dread law is the law of karma. As you sow, so you will reap. Meanwhile, the dread law is there and none can abrogate it. No exception. So it is, this is what he is saying, violence has its place and you cannot dispense with it. We have to accept it and account it for, etc. So now we continue. Sanjay Uvacha. Now, what will follow doesn't have any spiritual content, but it is still interesting. You will see how evolved ancient Indian culture was. Pehla, see the names of the people involved. Very beautiful names. Not like Pinky and things like that. Very evolved, beautiful names. Nowadays, people copy the West and they give these kind of names. But see this. In fact, sometimes people ask me that कोई नाम बताओ. Then I refer from here and give them. Ojas आएगा. Ojas means glory वाला. तो Ojaswi is the same as more than Tejas. ओजस उत्तम औजा आएगा एक वॉरियर का नाम. सो सी, एंड दे वर सो इवॉल्व कल्चरली कि उन्होंने अपने घोड़ों को, फ्लैग्स को, रथों को, उनको भी बड़े सुंदर नाम दिए. वो शंखों को, इवन दे हैव नेम्ड इवन दोज एंड वेरी ब्यूटिफुल नेम्स. So keep that in mind. It's a reflection of the richness of and maturity of our ancient culture. Drishtva tu Pandavanikam vyuham Duryodhanastada Acharyam upasangamya Raja Vachanam abravit. One more thing. This meter is called the Anushtup meter. Anushtup, in ancient times there was no prose, गद्य नहीं था. Simple narration के लिए they used the Anushtup meter, and where they wanted to highlight in poetic form they used other meters. और वो आएंगे गीता में, there it's called Upendra Vajra, Indra Vajra, like that. Other, those shlokas are supposed to be poetry, but these are, though it is poetry, but it's supposed to be a substitute for plain prose. So this is what they call the narrative format of Anushtup meter. Drishtva, then the prince Duryodhan, having seen the army of the Pandavas arrayed in battle order, approached his teacher and spoke these words. पश्यैतां पाण्डुपुत्राणाम् आचार्य महतीं च मूं व्यूढां द्रुपदपुत्रेण तव शिष्येण धीमता. Behold this mighty host of the sons of Pandu, O Acharya, arrayed means made to stand in, arranged in battle order, in formation, arrayed by Drupada's son, thy intelligent disciple. Now you will see another interesting thing, and this is a very strange coincidence. Mahabharata is an epic. In Greek, you have Homer's two epics, Iliad and Odyssey. In in Latin, you have another epic by Virgil called the Aeneid, etc. Peculiar चीज ये है, I don't know how it has happened, but it is a feature common to epics in different ages, different cultures. It's transcultural and transtemporal. वो ये है, it is this tendency to qualify a noun, a name with a qualifying adjectival phrase. This is grammar, I'll explain it. For instance, in Homer's Iliad, it is the theme of that epic is the wrath of Achilles. Achilles was a Greek hero, warrior, and he, uh, his closest friend was killed by Hector, who was the foremost champion warrior on the Trojan side. So that provoked Achilles, and he decided to kill Hector. तो वो सारा उसमें डिस्क्रिप्शन है, वो डिटेल में और सब. फिर उसने हेक्टर को मार लिया और फिर उसके बॉडी को उसके बूढ़े बाप को रिलीज किया. हेक्टर का बूढ़ा बाप था किंग प्रायन, उसको दिया और उसने फिर उसके दाह संस्कार किए. Last line of Iliad is, such were the funeral rites of Hector, the tamer of horses. Tamer of horses has nothing to do with the funeral rites and all. It is, but this is an epic tradition of putting such phrases along with the name of the hero. See here, Maheshwasa. Maheshwasa is not the name of the hero. It is one of the, it's an epithetical phrase. He of the mighty bow. Ishu means arrow. Ishwasa means जिसके ऊपर एरो रेस्ट करे, दैट इज अ बो. बो की स्ट्रिंग पे तो रेस्ट करके खींच के फायर करते. तो इश, so अब देखो ना, यू विल सी दीज क्वालिफाइंग फ्रेजेस. अत्र शूरा महेश्वासा, शूर भी एंड ऑफ माइटी बोज. भीमार्जुन समायुधि युयुधानो विराटश्च द्रुपदश्च महारथ. See here, these are names. भीम, अर्जुन, युयुधान, विराट, द्रुपद. पर द्रुपद के साथ वो फ्रेज है महारथ, ऑफ द ग्रेट चैरियट, जिसका चैरियट बहुत बड़ा है. धृष्टकेतुश्चकितान, these are again names. काशीराजश्च वीर्यवान, वीर्यवान is an adjectival. पुरुजित कुंती भोजश्च शैब्यश्च नरपुंगव युधामन्युश्च विक्रांत. See what a beautiful name. उत्तम औजा, जिसका जो who is endowed with supreme glory. कितना सुंदर नाम है. उत्तम औजाश्च वीर्यवान सौभद्रो द्रौपदेयाश्च सर्व एव महारथा. Here in this mighty army are heroes and great bowmen who are equal in battle to Bhim and Arjuna, Yuyudhana, Virata and Drupada of the great car, see, of the great car, Dhrita, Drishtaketu, Chakitana, and the valiant prince of Kashi, Urujit, and Kunti Bhoja, and Shaibya, foremost among men, Yudhamanyu the strong, and Uttamauja the victorious, Subhadra's son Abhimanyu, and the sons of Draupadi, all of them of great prowess. So these are the warriors on the Pandava side. वो बता रहा है दुर्योधन सी he is telling what Duryodhan said. See the translation. Then the prince Duryodhan, having seen the army of the Pandavas arrayed in approach his teacher. What Sanjay is narrating is what Duryodhan told Dronacharya. Pardon? I have been doing it for 15 years. I know what I am talking about. This is what we are reading is second hand. Duryodhan told Dronacharya and Sanjay because he had that television type of boon. He is repeating it to Dhritarashtra. That your son Duryodhan said this to Dronacharya. See, then the prince Duryodhan, having seen the army of the Pandavas arrayed in battle order, approached his teacher and spoke these words. तो दुर्योधन द्रोणाचार्य को कह रहा है देखो ये पांडव सारे शूरवीर जो इकट्ठे हुए and then he will list down the Kaurava heroes also, but we'll stop here.